Boom, boom. Welcome to SCP, where we get our smileys, Anyway, so today I'm going to be talking about. Should we just go?
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I hope you're all watching. Hello from all of us at STP Pre-K /Spark/HIP. Hope you guys are all enjoying your summer. So this is my case conceptualization. Just to give you a brief overview on my client, he is a 4-year-old male. He was diagnosed with a developmental delay and a speech delay prior to coming to treatment. He displays some behavioral concerns at home and at school. He is Hispanic and is white. He has a mom, a dad, and an older brother that he lives with. The only medical history in his family was that both his dad has a learning disability and his brother was diagnosed with ADHD as well. So there is family that he has in his family. Should I start this over? So there are people in his family that do have a diagnosis of ADHD, behavioral and developmental disorders. However, the household is stable, so his mother and father are married and have a stable relationship. As for the treatment modality and rationale, I chose parent-child interaction therapy. That's what the mother was seeking. It was mostly for decreasing the defiant behaviors, like outright saying no, things of that sort, reducing redirection, so constantly having to redirect him and constantly having to repeat herself, and establishing, obviously, a positive relationship and a positive bond between the mother and the child. So even though PCIT does focus on the relationship between parents and their children, there is an overlap and it does carry on over into the classroom setting, which she had mentioned was a concern for her as well. As for the approach and the components of PCIT, as we've mentioned before, there are 2 treatment phases. So the first treatment phase is CDI, also known as child-directed interactions. So the main premises of CDI is to establish the positive rapport with the child, kind of build the foundation to be able to then go into the parent-directed, to increase the pride skills, which is praising, reflections, imitation, descriptions, and enthusiasm. So using all these skills in a play setting. And also to decrease questions, commands, and criticisms in a time when they're supposed to be enjoying their special time. The second phase is PDI, also known as parent-directed interaction. So the strategies used within PDI are using effective commands rather than ineffective commands. Effective commands such as being direct, being specific, being positive, one at a time, things like that. Establishing appropriate timeout procedure. So being very consistent, being able to follow through with a timeout procedure that they know is predictable is also very important in this therapy. And getting the child to improve on following directions, just giving a direction, giving a command one time and then giving them a warning if they don't comply, and then if they do comply, then following through with the behavior. So we're essentially teaching them that they should only have to listen to a command once before they comply. The mastery criteria for the PDI phase is that 75% of commands must be effective and the timeout must be followed through efficiently. And I'll go ahead and go into more detail about the CDI in just a bit. So as for theoretical orientation of PCIT, the child-directed interaction is based off of Diana Baumrinn's work regarding parenting styles, and it is based off of the attachment theory. So according to attachment theory, a child's sense of knowing that he or she will be responded to when necessary is established by the foundation of being sensitive and being warm with your child. And the parent-directed interaction phase, which is when they start establishing the timeout and the more kind of establishing more limit setting, was based on Patterson's coercion theory, and it's based off of also the social learning theory. So it focuses on disruptive behaviors, and disruptive behaviors, and through parental reinforcement and negative attention, allowing children to escape commands. So the idea is for them to learn from the commands that they are giving and being able to follow through as well. So the measures used for eligibility, once we do meet with them for the first time, we do conduct a semi-structured interview, open-ended, ask questions more or less about their behavior, their family history, if they have taken medication, any strategies they've used in the past. We also administer the ECBE, so they must have an intensity raw score, meaning a T-score of above 120, because 120 is the average for a typically developing child with no disruptive behavior disorders. We do also engage in a baseline coding where we observe parents play with their child for 15 minutes in 3 different interactions. So one in which the child chooses the activity, the second in which the parent chooses the activity, and then the final is a cleanup phase. So we do code to see how the parents use their skills before we start treatment. And lastly, we do academic testing. We use the Bracken to determine school readiness, because typically our kids are between 4 and 5 years of age, and the Wechsler Preschool Primary Scale of Intelligence to get their IQ. So just to briefly talk about the 5 minutes every session of coding, these are the measures that we use to monitor progress within the treatment. So we do the coding of 5 minutes every session to count the pride skills, as I mentioned before, and we want to make sure that they're meeting mastery. So their mastery is to get 10 behavior descriptions, 10 reflections, and 10 labeled praises, and less than 3 questions, 3 commands, and 3 criticisms. As for the Average Child Behavior Inventory, also known as the ECBE, it's the measure that we want to make sure that they have below 120 or below, to make sure that they reached the intensity behavior that we're trying to achieve, or that the intensity of the behavior is not as taxing as it once was, trying to not make it as much as a problem. The intensity scale measures how frequent also the particular behaviors occur within the child. So we want to measure whether it's decreasing, increasing as the weeks go by, and how the treatment outcome differs. This is a picture of the progress graph that we use for our CDI skills. So we don't really look at the teaching talking. We don't usually look at the teaching talking, but the behavior descriptions, reflections, labeled praises. And we do differentiate between the labeled and unlabeled praises as well. This is a progress graph for the ECBE, so they do need to reach the 120 line. If they fall below, then that is a good sign. If they're above the 120, that's the reason why they're seeking treatment. And it is given to them weekly, sometimes bi-weekly, usually bi-weekly. So as for the empirical and clinical support for parent-child interaction therapy, there was a randomized trial done to measure the efficacy of parent-child interaction therapy. And the study was based off of parents who got immediate assistance and people who were put on a wait list. So results indicated that parents in the immediate treatment condition actually interacted more positively with their child and were more successful in increasing their child's compliance. Those who received treatment also reported to have less stress, parenting stress specifically, and a more internal locus of control. So all families who received treatment actually reported high levels of satisfaction with the treatment and the process. Empirical and clinical support for the ECBE, there was a research study done to examine the concurrent validity of the problem and intensity scales of the ECBE. So the ECBE scales were correlated with both internalizing and externalizing scales on the CBCL, the Child Behavior Checklist. However, there were significantly higher correlations with the externalizing scale. Therefore, as we are targeting disruptive behavior disorders, and it is part of the externalizing area, that's why the ECBE kind of fit more for PCIT and disruptive behavior. So results supported the validity of the ECBE as a concise measure for childhood conduct problem behaviors such as ODD and ADHD as well. So going into more on the client, my client's problems are listed above, and it includes him having a speech delay. So at the beginning of treatment, he was not verbal at all, very limited words. Developmental delay, so he's cognitively delayed. He is defiant with non-preferred activities, and he wasn't able to sit still or pay attention for more than a few seconds at a time. On the other hand, his strengths include that he does have a close and warm relationship with his family. He enjoys singing and dancing, so it's an incentive for him, and he definitely likes a lot of positive attention and likes to be praised. So as for a diagnosis and how I got to this diagnosis, so he already had the developmental and speech delay diagnosis, but I do believe that he has autism spectrum disorder. And my rationale for the diagnosis, I used parent report and also behavioral observation for the formal diagnosis. And it's mostly from parent reports and from observation of social communication, isn't able to communicate well with others or efficiently. Failure to develop peer relationships, so is almost disinterested in having that sort of interaction with peers, and doesn't really initiate or sustain an interchangeable conversation for the age that he is at. I also do believe that he has attention hyperactivity deficit disorder, also known as ADHD, due to his inability to stay still, interrupting others when speaking, being overly active. He does throw tantrums, and it also goes into the short attention span. So I would say, and because it occurs in the homeschool and public settings, it fully endorses the disorder, and it is an impairment across all settings. So as for the client's stages of change at the start and at the end of treatment, I do believe that my client's mother was in full preparation mode. She had every intent of taking action into getting therapy for herself and for her son, as they are technically both my client, or they were. The stage of change at the end of treatment was action. There was active modification of the behavior, and it was fully implemented. And she was able to almost decrease a lot of his problem behaviors. Cultural and ethical considerations. A cultural consideration is that the family is Hispanic, so they do tend to have warm relationships, close relationships, especially their household. This is beneficial because CDI is all about establishing the positive rapport and the positive relationship. And it facilitates really the good relationship, and she's also very enthusiastic, so it helps a lot in the matter. Any ethical limitations? Not really. There is an informed consent done during the initial evaluation, and it states that all sessions are recorded for supervision purposes, and that we do not disclose any information unless the child exhibits actions of hurting himself or others. So there were no treatment obstacles or barriers associated with this case. And as for the client progress and prognosis, my client's mother has acquired, by the end of treatment, she had acquired the appropriate skills to both develop and enhance her child's ability to comply, and she was able to decrease and manage his problem behaviors at home. So, and his language abilities also happened to increase as a result. Mediators for the treatment included weekly administration of the ECB, with T-scores lowering from 155 at the initial intake to 100, with 120, as I mentioned, being the target score. Future recommendations include enrollment in the summer treatment program for children who have autism, also known as a summer program for autism in rising kindergarteners, also known as SPARK. The behavior modification program will target both the ADHD-related behavioral concerns, and it also incorporates some social, emotional, and self-regulation curriculum to improve his social skills and self-regulation as well. He will also be in a contained classroom with kids with a similar diagnosis. And these are my references. Thank you very much.